Hello my lovelies and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Angelique and I am an author and an avid reader who is sharing my journey from writing to editing to hopefully traditionally publishing my debut novel, which goes by the alias of Project Tongue. So lately I've been doing a lot more reading videos and I kind of am in the mood to do a writing video today because that's been more where my real life has been at. I've definitely been reading, and if you saw my last video, it was my first ever January TBR jar. Wait, how do I say that? It's a tongue twister. It was my first ever TBR jar picks my reading prompts for January video. Essentially, I used a TBR jar for the first time for the month of January. So I'm still in the middle of making progress of those 5 different books that I picked. If you want to see what those were, I'll link it in the cards above for you. But I started reading A River Enchanted first because that was the one that I was already in the middle of when I got cut off from reading it. So I was really excited to get back into that one and I'm loving it so far. That's all I'll say. I'll leave all of the reviews for another video at the end of this month. But today we are getting more into my writing life versus my reading life. I should have brought the manuscript. Oh, that's good. Side note, yesterday I was drinking some tea and the second I poured it out of the teapot and into the teacup, I went to go sit down on my couch and it spilled all over my shin. Literally boiling, scalding water all over my shin. So right now I have like a 3rd to 4th degree burn. I don't know which one. Essentially, it's just a purple bubble of skin. So I'm gonna be very careful with this. But don't tell my husband I did just spill this too. I don't know what's going on with me lately. I spilled coffee the other day. That's a whole other conversation. But anyway, for those of you who don't know, I am a new writer. I have been writing for only a year now. When I say writing for only a year, like of course I took English and I did very well in English and I wrote essays and I wrote short stories, but never because I wanted to funnel a creative idea in that way. And I wrote songs, a lot of songs, but I've never written a book. So all of 2025, literally the entire year, was dedicated to writing the first draft of Project Tongue, which is a fantasy novel that for me so far is definitely skewing new adult, and it follows 2 girls in a very dystopian society. It's very gothic. So hard to like say things about it. It just feels weird. It's very gothic and it has very deep themes that are really important to me that touch on feminism, sexuality, identity, self-discovery, curiosity, knowledge is power. So I am saying a lot of things that I want to say in this book, so I really took my time when I was writing it just because I am so new to this. I read so many novels on how to write a novel. Highly recommend Brandon Sanderson's series of how to write a novel. His lectures that he gives at an actual college or university, he posts a video of them online for free. That is gold if you haven't checked that out and you are a writer. Also, Save the Cat Writes a Novel, Story Genius by Lisa Crone. There's another book I'm reading now that I'm more so in the editing phase. It's this one right here, Self-Editing for Fiction Writers. And actually, spilled water all over this too. That's like a concerning pattern that I have going on, but anyway. So where am I at now? I have, since finishing the first draft, taken the advice that everybody gives of stepping away from my novel and kind of clearing my mind, getting out of the weeds so that the next time I read the book, or the first time I read the book, because I've never read it, I've only written it, I've kind of forced myself to not go back and reread, so that when I do that, I'm able to see it more as a reader than I ever will be able to hopefully remove some biases and have a little bit of a more clean slate when going into it and be able to be objective about it and not so precious. So I did that. In the meantime, I'd been reading a lot and I have been reading a lot of books on writing just to keep my head in that space because I've actually been itching to get back into the book. So now that it is officially January, I am reading my novel for the first time, which is crazy. Here is my novel. This is her girth. And of all of that, this is how much I've actually read so far and taken very light notes on. So I'm about 50% of the way through, but we're learning this together. As I'm learning this, I'm sharing it with you. And I was really curious, like, okay, how do I go into edits? How do I break this down? Because I wouldn't say that my manuscript is anywhere near query ready for what I want to do with this story, but I want to know how to get there in bite-sized pieces. And I think that what I've come to the conclusion of that's going to work best for me and my personality, because I am incredibly thorough to a fault, I think, is that I want to break up my editing schedule or routine into quarters instead of just thinking of this is my goal for the entirety of 2026 for my editing and making a schedule that I may or may not stick to. I want to look at it in manageable bite-sized chunks. So every quarter of 2026, I'm going to sit down and go over with you my new goals for that section of the year as it relates to my baby, my book. So this video is dedicated to Q1, which we are officially in. I downloaded Notion and I have been like creating so many pages on Notion to help organize my ideas because I have a lot of them. So if you see me referencing my phone, that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at my Notion. Essentially for me, January through March, Q1, I want to focus on draft 2 of my book. That's all I'm going to concern myself with right now. Because at the beginning of the year, I was like, oh my God, is this my querying year? How many drafts am I going to have to do to get it query ready to the point where I can get it in before fall comes and all the agents go on vacation? And I was just overthinking the process. So I'm trying to not concern myself with that. Querying may be a 2027 situation. That's okay. But my main priority is to make this manuscript as strong as possible. I want to genuinely be as proud of it as possible. I am a perfectionist, so for me, I want to make sure that I'm not over editing at the same time, because I think that there is also a version of me that continues to find something to make better. And at a point, you have to say, I'm not necessarily making it better, I'm just changing things. And you have to know when that is. So hopefully that doesn't become a problem for me in the future. But starting in January, like I said, I've started reading my book, and all I'm doing right now as I'm reading through is making light notes. I'm not stopping and going on my laptop and saying, okay, I'm gonna edit this scene in this chapter right now. I am forcing myself to read it like a reader who doesn't have access to the actual document. That's part of why I also printed it out, because I knew that it would be easier for me to stay in that mindset if I was reading it more like an actual book, something that's tangible, that I have to stick with and that I cannot physically change the words on. So I'm halfway through that. And what's perfect about the way I did this as well is when I finished the first draft, I immediately sent it to my alpha readers, and that was back in November, the end of November. So they had all of December to read the first draft of my book. I sent it to 3 alpha readers, my friend Macy, who's also a writer, my husband, and my mother, who also is a self-published author. So when I was thinking about alpha readers, I did send them questions that I specifically wanted answers to, but I kept all of them very big picture because I just want developmental notes at that stage. I just want to know, is there any major plot holes that I missed? Is the pacing overall keeping up with what you're expecting? Are there any characters or character arcs that are not working for you? Big things like that, because there's definitely a lot of typos. There's definitely, the formatting is crazy right now. And there's also so many little things that I know for myself are going to change. Like there's even character names I'm gonna change. By the time my alpha readers finished reading and got all of their notes back to me in December, I knew that January was going to be the start of me implementing those changes. But first I needed to read the book myself. Now that I'm in the middle of reading the book, the second I finish that, I am also going to go through a Google Docs that I made while I was writing that contains literally pages and pages and pages of more notes. One thing that really worked for me personally, because when I started writing, I started to run into the issue of editing too much as I was going. So somewhere in the second or third chapter, I kept wanting to make it better and better, and it was stopping me from making progress. I had to put my foot down and come up with a solution to that, and my idea was, let's have a Google Doc, a running notes of things that you want to change, but you're not allowed to change them as you're writing. You're only allowed to change them when you edit, after you have finished the first draft altogether. So the second I came up with an idea that I thought would work better for the book, instead of going back into the chapter where I should have mentioned that, I wrote it down in my Google Docs, and I kept writing from that point on as though the change was already made. So that way, all I would have to do is go back to the initial point where I should have mentioned it, and that was all I needed to fix, and then it made sense in the rest of the story. So I have notes full of all of that stuff too. And then what I'm gonna do still in January is to read the book again. Not really super in depth, just like kind of quickly skim it again, and this time make heavier notes. Now that I have the Alpha Reader's notes in my mind, and I also have the Google Docs notes in my mind, because the first time I'm reading this right now is actually a little bit more for enjoyment and experience rather than editing, although I am jotting down small things. When I read it again, it's going to be with the eyes of an editor. And then hopefully the last thing I'm going to be doing in January is re-outlining. So I do have an outline that is pretty outdated at this point. It served to guide me along the way, but the story ended up finding itself, creating paths that I couldn't have thought of until I started writing, honestly. So I thought that I would be such a to the T plotter because I'm a little bit more type A, but I'm a mixture. I'm a bit of a mixture of a plotter and a discovery writer because there's some magic you just can't fully capture in plotting. There are some nuances and details and character personalities that come up as you refine the story that you just couldn't have ever predicted, in my opinion. So I need to update my outline, and that will help me a lot when I actually get back to rewriting and editing, because then I'll have something that's not completely outdated from a year ago when I thought I knew where the book was going. So those are my plans for January. What day is it? As of the time of me filming this, it's January 12th. So we're already halfway through January and I'm only halfway through the first read. So I'm gonna need to pick up the pace a little bit, but I still think I can do it. And like I said, everything I'm about to say is for the entirety of Q1 of 2026. So there's some wiggle room in there where if I bleed a little bit into February, I'll still be okay. So now moving on to February and March, literally the only thing I have written for February and March is to write the second draft. So that's crazy because I took a year to write the first draft. A year. And I swore to myself, I was like, when I write the second draft, I'm rewriting the whole book. I'm writing from scratch. I love Christiane Jones. I'm so excited. I was watching her whole process of writing Project Teacup, which, I can't remember the name of the book now, but I think it's available for pre-order. Anyway, and she said she rewrote every single draft of that book from scratch to strengthen her writing skills as she went, which I thought was an incredible way to go about it. Very thorough. I'm sure tedious for a lot of people, but as someone who's a new writer, I think you only get better the more you write. So I wanted to adopt that same strategy. But now as I'm reading back, I don't know that it's actually gonna serve me the best to completely rewrite every single thing from scratch. There's a little bit of a magic in a bottle that is caught when you're just writing off the dome. And I'm a new writer, but I feel like sometimes the first thing that comes out can sometimes be the most honest. Everything after that is processed, is filtered. So I don't wanna try to recreate moments that I really like in my first draft. I think there are some scenes that are gonna be completely rewritten. There are some scenes that are gonna be completely scrapped. And then there's gonna be some scenes that are probably more of a hybrid because there's something about it I don't wanna touch. I think you can edit away magic. There are some moments when I'm reading through my manuscript where I do get a gut punch feeling of the way I said something or the way I worded something, where I get really fulfilled by it or really satisfied. I'm like, yes, you said it. I have always had this. I love language so much. I love words, vocabulary. I love accuracy and efficiency. When you just nail a point, like, okay, this is a little existential here, but this is my channel, so we're gonna go there. Sometimes, like, if you really think about it, if you really think about communication, it is such an incredible thing. These are all arbitrary sounds coming out of my mouth. We assign meaning to them, and words can be interpreted very differently by different people, depending on who's saying it and depending on who's hearing it, depending on where you place a comma, a breath, depending on your tone, where you go up or down. I think communication is such a skill when it comes to successfully portraying what you are intending to get across. I think one of my life's purposes is to find words that do that every time I speak, especially when it comes to something that is in written form, that is hopefully going to be permanent one day in print. So when I read a sentence and I can't think of a way I could convey my meaning better, there is a satisfaction that comes from that nothing else in the world gives me. I can be frustrating to speak to because a lot of times I will stop and I will say, there's a word, and I will be insecure that I didn't say it right, or I'll say, I hope that made sense. That's really important to me. And I guess that's why I'm a writer now, and I don't know why I didn't think of this sooner, but anyway, I don't want to edit those moments out. So I'm not going to be entirely rewriting the book completely from scratch, but the outline that I come up with, I can look at the story so compressed in an outline, and to be able to think of beats or foreshadowing or little things that are going to connect it in a way that is very satisfying to me. So January is going to be a lot of planning, and then February and March is going to be a lot of executing. Now, another goal that I have is, and of course this would happen, so on the topic of spilling things, the other day I had to take the car in to get our horn fixed, and I was working from the car dealership or the car repair place, whatever. I had everything in one bag. Apparently on my drive home, my water bottle was leaking. I didn't know. It was leaking out, like dripping slowly. By the time I got home, my bag had a little pool of water in it and my laptop was in there. So my laptop is toast. That's kind of why I feel like, I don't know if it's been obvious, but I feel like my posting schedule has been a little off because I've had to borrow my husband's laptop. My laptop is completely out of commission. Thank God I have my book backed up. I hadn't had that thing backed up for the entirety of the year I was writing it, and then my cousin came in town in, I think, November, and she was like, "You're backing that up, right?" And I was like, no. And she was like, "Girl, if you don't back that up right now." Thank God I did. And then I backed it up again after I finished the first draft, and that's literally the only thing I care about. So essentially my goal now is that I have to get a new computer so that I can continue writing come February, which is an expense and a stress that I didn't anticipate, but hey, a new goal nonetheless, a new goal. So I have to do all of that to be able to do any of this. So reading off of my Notion, here's a little schedule that I have for myself on the editing. In the first 3 weeks of editing, that'll be considered pass 1 of the book. And I'm just gonna be looking at bigger picture things that I need to fix, like plot holes, developmental issues, character arcs, pacing, world building. Then in pass 2, I'm gonna be looking a little bit more in depth when it comes to prose and scenes themselves, dialogue tightening, refining things that I've repeated a couple of times, the consistency of my voice as the writer, but also the voices of the characters themselves, because this book is a dual point of view, and I want it to be very clear without you reading the header whose point of view you're reading from. And then my third pass will be more of a line level edit. And then aside from actual productivity goals, I have a couple of other goals that I think will just make my life feel more balanced as I'm writing. The first one is I want to make more writer friends that are in person or online, but I want to be able to interact in real life with more writers who understand this journey. Writing is incredibly isolating. You do it alone. You're in your head the whole time. You kind of are just sitting by a window and watching the sunset all day as you're typing away. And so I want to make sure that I'm not becoming a recluse as I'm doing this and that I have other people I can turn to who understand the process. And then the next personal goal is to write in more public spaces. I get very comfortable in my office. Some days I just don't want to get out of my pajamas, but I do want to force myself to go out in the sun more, to people watch more in public, and who knows what that inspires as I'm writing. But I do want to associate writing with something that feels akin to being more social. So even if I'm just around other human beings, that is a win. So as for right now, that is my plan for January to March. I'm really excited to start working on it and seeing this thing. Man, writing is like sculpting. It's like you're just slowly chipping away and molding a piece of work until you can see its final form reflect what was in your head all along. So I like this process. I really enjoy the process. And of course, I'm gonna be taking you guys with me throughout the whole thing, and I'll be vlogging and sharing updates on my editing journey, which will probably end up being the entirety of 2026 until I feel like the book is reading exactly how I want it to. I'm really proud of myself that I can finally hold my first draft in my hands, and I'm just really looking forward to sharing with you as I learn. So thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you for your support. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you be a part of the family, and I will see you guys in the next video.